Picture this. An Athenian counselor named Lycidas stands up inside a packed assembly hall on the island of Salamis. The air is tense. Everyone knows why they're here. Lycidas raises his hand, clears his throat, and makes what sounds like a reasonable suggestion. Maybe, he says, we should at least consider the Persian peace offer. No one boos. No one debates him. Instead, the other counselors close in. Stones appear in their hands. Lycidas is beaten to death right there on the floor of the assembly. And it doesn't stop with him. When word spreads through Athens, the women hear the noise and rush to Lycidas's home. They drag his wife and children into the street and stone them to death as well. This isn't legend. It isn't exaggeration. This happened in 479 BC. The Greeks were done talking. They were traumatized, homeless, and furious. The 300 Spartans at Thermopylae were dead. Athens had been burned to the ground, twice. Diplomacy had failed. Mercy had failed. The only language left was violence. That mindset is what sets the stage for the final showdown of the Persian Wars. This is the Battle of Plataea, the moment the Greeks stopped being victims and became executioners. Before we dive into these brutal, often forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy uncovering the darker truths of history, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I still find it incredible that we're exploring ancient blood-soaked battlefields together from opposite ends of the modern world. Now, the murder of Lycidas proves one thing above all else. Greece was desperate. King Xerxes had gone home, but the danger hadn't left with him. He'd left behind his most capable commander, General Mardonius, and Mardonius wasn't a tourist king playing conqueror. He was a predator. He sat in the plains of Boeotia with roughly 300,000 hardened troops, elite veterans of the largest empire on earth, holding Greece by the throat. To prove he was still in control, he marched south and burned what little remained of Athens. Again. The message was clear. I am still here. The Athenians, now refugees living out of ships and tents, finally snapped. They sent envoys to Sparta, but this wasn't a plea for help. It was a threat. They told the Spartan ephors, if you don't march now, the Athenian navy will join Persia, and when that happens, your walls won't save you. That threat landed like a thunderbolt. Sparta had been hiding behind the Isthmus of Corinth, hoping the problem would solve itself. But the idea of Athens and Persia united was unthinkable. If that happened, the Peloponnese would be strangled from the sea. So the Spartan war machine finally woke up, and when Sparta moves, it moves fast. In a single night, the ephors issued a mobilization order that borders on insanity. They didn't send a small force. They didn't send a probe. They emptied the city. 5,000 full Spartiates, the elite warrior class, suited up for war. But here's the detail that shows how serious this was. They brought the slaves. For every Spartan hoplite, 7 Helot slaves were armed and ordered to march. That's 35,000 Helots, pressed into service, marching alongside their masters. Add another 5,000 allied troops from the Peloponnese, and a column of roughly 45,000 men vanished northward before dawn. When the Athenian envoys woke up the next morning ready to scream at Spartan leaders, the ephors simply glanced at the sun and said, "You can stop shouting. The army is already at the border." The hunt had begun. While the Spartans were marching north, raising dust and fear with every step, Mardonius was already planning his next move. And this is where we need to correct one of the biggest misconceptions about the Persian Wars. Popular culture loves to portray the Persians as a mindless horde, untrained slaves driven forward by whips. That image is propaganda. The army Mardonius kept in Greece was nothing like the bloated ceremonial force Xerxes had marched across the Hellespont. Mardonius sent the conscripts home. He trimmed the fat. What remained was a professional killing machine. These were the immortals, the heavy infantry who had shattered Greek lines before. These were Saka horse archers from the Central Asian steppe, men who could shoot accurately at full gallop. This army was built for speed, maneuverability, and tactical flexibility. When scouts reported that the Spartans had finally left the Peloponnese, Mardonius didn't panic. He smiled. This was exactly what he wanted. He knew fighting hoplites in the streets of Athens would be suicide. Heavy infantry needed space. Cavalry needed room to work. So Mardonius ordered Athens evacuated, then destroyed it completely. Anything still standing after the first invasion was torn down, burned, or smashed into rubble. Temples, houses, walls, everything. Athens became a graveyard of stone and ash. Then Mardonius withdrew north into Boeotia, near the city of Thebes. This wasn't a retreat. It was a calculated invitation. He chose his battlefield with surgical precision, setting up camp along the Asopus River in the flat plains of Plataea. Why there? Because the Greek phalanx, for all its strength, had a fatal flaw. It was slow. On open ground, Persian cavalry could circle it, harass it, starve it, and break it apart. Mardonius even built a massive fortified stockade, an entire wooden city of towers and walls, creating a secure base from which to operate. Then he waited, and the Greeks almost walked straight into the trap. The allied Greek army, now swollen with reinforcements from every city-state that hadn't surrendered to Persia, arrived at the southern edge of the plain. From the foothills of Mount Cithaeron, they looked down at an ocean of Persian tents, grazing horses, and glittering armor. Pausanias, the Spartan regent and commander-in-chief, made the smartest decision of his life. He stopped. The Greeks refused to descend into the plain. Instead, they hugged the rocky slopes where cavalry couldn't reach them. It became a deadly staring contest. Mardonius in the valley, Pausanias on the ridge. Days passed. Mardonius grew impatient. He hadn't come to Greece to watch Spartans sweat in the hills. He wanted blood, so he decided to test them. He didn't send his infantry. He sent his cavalry commander, Mecistius. Mecistius was a legend in the Persian army. He was massive, charismatic, and wildly popular. He rode a Nisaean stallion with a bridle of solid gold and led his cavalry straight up the slopes toward the Greek lines. The Persians rode in circles, laughing, shouting insults, and firing arrows. They mocked the Greeks for hiding in the hills. Casualties mounted. The Greeks couldn't strike back. A contingent of Megarians was pinned down and on the verge of collapse. They sent an urgent message to Pausanias. "Send help, or we're leaving." 300 Athenians stepped forward. They rushed down to support the Megarians, bringing archers of their own. In the chaos that followed, luck intervened. An arrow struck Mecistius's horse, sending the animal rearing and throwing its rider to the ground. The Athenians swarmed him, but they couldn't kill him. Mecistius wore scale armor beneath his tunic, nearly impervious to their blades. Swords bounced off, spears glanced away. He fought like a walking fortress until one soldier realized the only opening. He drove the spike of his spear through the eye-hole of Mecistius's helmet. The giant fell. The Persian cavalry charged desperately to recover his body, and a brutal melee erupted over the corpse. But the Greeks held. They loaded Mecistius's body onto a cart, and paraded it through their lines. It was a massive morale boost. They had drawn first blood. But Pausanias knew better. From the valley below, Mardonius was watching, and he was no longer smiling. The real war was about to begin. The celebration didn't last. In fact, it vanished almost instantly, like water on sun-baked stone. Because now it's August, and the Greek summer isn't just hot, it's oppressive. The sun feels like a physical force, pounding down on men sealed inside bronze armor that turns their bodies into ovens. Sweat never stops. Thirst becomes its own kind of terror. Pausanias looked across the ridgeline and realized the truth. The Greeks were safe from cavalry up here, but they were slowly being killed by the landscape. They were too far from reliable water. So emboldened by the kill of Mecistius, Pausanias ordered a move. The entire Greek line, around 100,000 men, shuffled down from the foothills toward the Asopus River, settling near a crucial water source called the Gargaphia Spring. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it was a mistake. Mardonius watched them descend and didn't attack. No glorious charge, no clash of civilizations moment. He simply saw what had happened. The Greeks had stretched themselves out and exposed what mattered most, their supply line. Their lifeline ran back through mountain passes, and now those passes were vulnerable. So Mardonius snapped his fingers and unleashed Persian cavalry again, but not to win a battle, to win the war without one. Persian horsemen swept around the Greek position like wolves, hit the passes behind them, and intercepted a massive convoy, roughly 500 supply wagons carrying food from the Peloponnese. They didn't just capture the wagons. They slaughtered the drivers. They killed the oxen. They destroyed the supplies. Suddenly, Plataea wasn't about heroism. It wasn't even about strategy. It was about hunger. The Greeks were cut off from bread, and now Mardonius tightened the noose. For 8 long days, both armies sat in place. The Greeks were terrified to advance onto open ground where cavalry could tear them apart. They couldn't retreat without looking like cowards and shattering morale. So they stayed, baking under the sun, while Persian horsemen rode up daily, firing volleys of arrows, then laughing as they galloped away. Come out and fight like men. The taunts never stopped. Pausanias held the line through discipline. He forbade reckless charges. He forced his men to endure. But discipline doesn't fill stomachs, and it doesn't create water. Then came the breaking point. On the 11th day, Mardonius decided he was tired of waiting. He ordered a strike, not against the front line, but against the Greek army's most vulnerable artery, the Gargaphia Spring. This wasn't combat. It was vandalism with military consequences. Persian cavalry pushed past the Greek line, trampled the spring, churned it into filth. Horses stamped the earth until the clear water became thick mud, undrinkable sludge. And just like that, the Greek army's only dependable water source was gone. Picture it. Night falls. You haven't eaten properly in days. Your mouth is dry. Your lips are cracked. Your throat burns. The spring is ruined. Cavalry controls the roads behind you. You're trapped. Panic rippled through the coalition. And here's the thing about Greek coalitions. They were never one army. They were dozens of armies forced to pretend they were one. Different commanders, different egos, different fears. Now the arguing began. Athenians wanted to attack. Corinthians wanted to withdraw. Others wanted to hold position and pray. The Spartans, as always, stonewalled. Pausanias, holding this fragile alliance together with sheer force of will, realized he had no choice. If they stayed one more day, the army would dissolve, either from thirst, starvation, or mutiny. So he made a decision that is considered one of the most dangerous maneuvers in warfare: a night retreat in the face of the enemy. The plan was simple on the surface and horrifying in practice. At the second watch of the night, the entire army would pack up in silence and withdraw to a defensive position called the island, closer to the mountains and closer to fresh water. It required coordination. It required timing. It required every contingent to move together without making noise, while the Persian camp sat only a short distance away. On paper, it was brilliant. In real life, it became a nightmare. As the moon climbed over the dark silhouette of Mount Cithaeron, the Greeks prepared to move. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to stumble into a comedy of errors so disastrous it could have ended Western history in a single night. Because the moment the signal came, the coalition fell apart. In the center of the Greek line, troops from Corinth, Megara, and other allied city-states didn't withdraw carefully. They panicked. They grabbed their shields and practically ran. And they didn't stop at the agreed position. They kept going, all the way back to the town of Plataea itself, clustering around the temple of Hera. Half the army had just removed itself from the battle. Not because it was ordered to, because fear took over. Meanwhile, on the right wing, where the Spartans stood, the problem wasn't fear, it was pride. And it comes down to one man, Captain Amompharetus. Amompharetus commanded the Locos of Pitane, a prestigious Spartan unit. When Pausanias ordered the retreat, Amompharetus refused. He stood his ground and told the regent that he would not shame Sparta by running away from the strangers, his insult for the Persians. Now imagine the scene. It's around 2 a.m. It's pitch black. The rest of the army is trying to slip away quietly, and the supreme commander of Greece is in a loud, furious argument with one of his own captains. Pausanias pleaded. He tried to explain it wasn't a retreat, it was a repositioning. Amompharetus didn't care. To a Spartan raised on Thermopylae, stepping backward wasn't tactics, it was heresy. Then he made it theatrical. He picked up a massive stone from the riverbed, something closer to a boulder than a pebble, and slammed it down at Pausanias's feet. It hit the ground with a thud that probably echoed through the valley, and Amompharetus shouted, "With this pebble I cast my vote not to flee from the strangers." In Spartan voting, you cast pebbles. He was mocking the process. He was voting for death. While this absurd internal drama was unfolding, the Athenians on the left wing sat confused. The Spartans were supposed to move first, but nothing was happening. So Athens sent a runner to find out what was going on. The messenger arrived and found Spartan commanders in a heated confrontation, while thousands of soldiers stood motionless in the dark. His reaction was essentially, the sun's coming up. Are we leaving or not?" Pausanias, exhausted and furious, made a brutal call. He decided to leave Amompharetus behind. He ordered the rest of the Spartan force to begin withdrawing, hoping Amompharetus would watch his comrades go and finally follow. It was a game of chicken played with tens of thousands of lives. The Spartan column began to move south, slow and cautious, constantly looking back. And sure enough, when Amompharetus realized he was truly being abandoned to face the Persian Empire alone, he cracked. He ordered his men to pick up their shields and jog to catch up. But it was too late. The sky was lightening. Birds began to sing. The valley took on that cold, gray glow that arrives right before dawn. And across the river, Persian sentries rubbed sleep from their eyes and looked out at the Greek position. What they saw was a gift. The center was gone. The Athenians were separated by hills, and the Spartans were strung out mid-march, disorganized, exposed, Amompharetus trailing behind like a lost child. General Mardonius stepped out of his tent and stared. He didn't see a controlled repositioning. He saw a collapse. He saw an army fleeing, and he laughed. He turned to his commanders and mocked the Spartan reputation. "Are these the men who never run? Look at them." Then he didn't wait for perfect formation. He didn't bother with an elaborate plan. He simply pointed at the retreating red cloaks and shouted, "Get them!" The dam broke. Persian cavalry surged forward, splashing across the river in a thundering wave. Behind them, immortals and infantry poured out, screaming war cries, rushing forward in a chaotic stampede. Hunters chasing prey. Pausanias heard it before he saw it, a low rumble growing into a roar. He turned. The horizon was filling with dust. He looked at his scattered Spartan column. He looked toward the distant Athenians. He looked back toward the allied contingents hiding in Plataea. And he understood the nightmare. He was alone. About 10,000 Spartans and their Tegean allies, plus tens of thousands of helots and light troops, were about to face the full weight of the Persian war machine. The maneuvering was over. The Battle of Plataea had officially begun, and the Spartans were caught flat-footed. The sun was fully up now, and with it came death. Mardonius didn't send his infantry forward for a clean, honorable clash. He was far too experienced for that. Instead, he ordered his archers, tens of thousands of them, to plant their wicker shields into the ground, forming a rough wall. Then he gave the order. Loose. The sky darkened. This is where the Battle of Plataea stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a psychological horror story. The Spartans and their Tegean allies, around 53,000 men, including helots, were stranded on open slopes. They weren't in full formation. They were caught mid-march. Persian cavalry swarmed the flanks, and the arrows kept coming. Volley after volley hammered into bronze shields, clanged off helmets, and found the gaps no armor could protect: the neck, the groin, the feet. The natural instinct was to charge or flee. Pausanias did neither. He ordered the army to halt. Then he did something almost unimaginable. He turned his back on the enemy and called for a priest. In the ancient Greek world, you did not fight until the gods approved. A goat was dragged forward. Pausanias slit its throat and examined the liver. The omens were bad. So he waited. Imagine being there. You're crouched behind your shield. Arrows are slamming into bronze inches from your face. Men around you are screaming. Blood is pooling in the dirt. And your general is staring at goat entrails and shaking his head. Behind the Spartans stood the helots. They weren't protected by bronze shields. Many had wicker targets or animal skins. They were slaves, men dragged from oppression to die for masters who owned them. And now they were being slaughtered just as efficiently. For them, this wasn't noble discipline. It looked like madness. Men were dying without fighting back. One of those men was Cleades, a Spartan described by Herodotus as the most beautiful man in the Greek army. An arrow struck him before the battle even began. As he was carried away dying, his last words weren't about pain. He said, "I do not mind dying for Greece. What I mind is that I die without striking a blow." Another goat, another sacrifice. Bad omens. Wait. The Persians crept closer, emboldened by the lack of resistance. They were now shouting insults directly at the Greeks as arrows continued to fall. The Tegeans on the flank finally snapped. They began to shift, ready to charge without orders. Pausanias glared at them. Then he did something extraordinary. He turned toward the distant temple of Hera, tears streaming down his face, and screamed a prayer, begging the goddess not to let them die in disgrace. This was the ultimate test of hoplite warfare. The phalanx is powerful, but rigid. That rigidity is usually a weakness. Here, it was the only thing preventing total collapse. If they charged early, cavalry would destroy them. If they ran, they'd be hunted down. Finally, on the third sacrifice, the signs changed. The liver was good. Pausanias stood. He didn't shout. He didn't give a speech. He simply raised his spear, and the statues came to life. The Spartans didn't walk forward. They detonated. All the rage, fear, and helplessness of that arrow storm exploded outward as the phalanx surged downhill. The impact wasn't the clang of swords. It was the crunch of wood snapping under bronze. The Persian wicker shields disintegrated instantly. Now the battle entered the othismos, the shoving match. The Persians fought bravely. That matters. They grabbed Spartan spears with bare hands, snapping shafts. They lunged with daggers, trying to find gaps. But courage can't beat physics. Persian armor was built to stop arrows, not heavy thrusts. Spartan armor was bronze from chin to knee. When Persians struck Spartans, blades glanced off. When Spartans struck Persians, bones broke. As spears shattered, Spartans drew their xiphos, short swords made for killing up close. This was revenge. They moved with mechanical efficiency, thrust, bash, step forward, repeat. The helots poured in behind them, finishing the wounded with knives and javelins. The dust rose so thick men fought by silhouette and sound, and in the center of it all was Mardonius. Unlike Xerxes, who watched battles from a throne, Mardonius fought from horseback. He rode a magnificent white horse, surrounded by 1,000 elite guards, cutting down any Spartan who broke formation. As long as he lived, the Persians held. The Spartans saw him, and they understood. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a hunt. The phalanx began to grind toward the white horse, ignoring gold, ignoring plunder, ignoring everything except the man who burned Athens. Bodies piled up. Persian guards died one by one, forming a ramp of flesh the Spartans climbed over. Then came the final blow. History remembers the man, Arimnestos. He lunged. Some say he hurled a rock that crushed Mardonius's skull. Others say a spear pierced his chest. The result was the same. Mardonius fell, and the battle changed instantly. Ancient armies were like snakes. Cut off the head, and the body dies. The immortals broke. Men who had never retreated dropped shields and ran. Artabazus, commanding a reserve of 40,000 troops, watched from a distance. He assessed the situation and chose survival. He turned around and marched straight out of Greece. The rest of the Persian army panicked and fled into their own wooden stockade, sealing themselves inside. They had trapped themselves. The Spartans reached the walls but struggled. Siege warfare wasn't their strength. Then the Athenians arrived. They breached the stockade. What followed wasn't a battle. It was extermination. No prisoners, no mercy. Tens of thousands trapped with nowhere to run. Ancient sources claim only a few thousand survived. When the killing finally stopped, silence fell. And then the Greeks realized something else. They were standing in a fortune. The Persian camp was a palace of gold, silver, tapestries, and coin. Pausanias entered Mardonius's tent and ordered Persian chefs to prepare a feast. Then he ordered Spartan cooks to prepare black broth. He placed the meals side by side and laughed. "Look at how he lived," he said, "and yet he came to rob us who have so little." It was ironic and prophetic, because that gold would destroy him. Pausanias returned home changed. He began dressing like a Persian, eating like one. Rumors spread of treason. Eventually, he fled into a temple, and the Spartans bricked him inside. Even his mother placed the first stone. He died starving. This is why Plataea isn't romanticized. The victory was ugly, necessary, final. Thermopylae gave us martyrs. Plataea gave us survival, and it reminds us of an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes freedom isn't won by beautiful defeats, but by brutal victories. If you made it this far, verify your subscription. Check out the next video on the rise of the Athenian Empire and what happened to the gold Pausanias laughed at. I'll see you there.